Check out David Pollack, College Football on YouTube. Also, David's new children's book, The Won't Quit Kid, now available online at bravebooks.com. Former All-American at Georgia, formerly of ESPN's College Game Day, kind enough to join us again. David, good to see you. When the final rankings came out, the playoff matchups came out, you thought what?
Is Oregon the number one seed or Georgia? That's the first thing when you saw the finalized bracket was, man, Oregon's got a tough row of hoe for a team that was undefeated, that looked like the best team all year long. And you look at their side, and if I'm starting to look at teams that I think have the talent to get hot and to win this thing, Ohio State, Tennessee, Texas, all on their side. And so if I'm Oregon, I probably was a little bit frustrated from that. And then obviously the SMU-Bama debate being settled going to SMU.
Okay, what did you think about that decision?
Well, here's the thing, man. I get a little bit frustrated, and I know Bama fans are great fans, and they should be great fans. They've had a lot to cheer about. And I do understand how you point to the wins, and you say, we have better wins than SMU. But we also have to point to the losses. And we got to realize that you got 2 losses to 6-6 teams, and you got beat by 21 to a 6-6 team. And so while I do understand that they played better competition, got more wins, I also understand that they got dominated by a poor team late in the season. They were very up and down throughout the season without a lack of consistency. And SMU was really consistent and then lost in a championship game. And the committee also showed us, too, the way they rank people. Like, they did not hurt anybody for playing in a championship game. They have in years past. This year, you could tell Texas didn't get hurt. They still got a huge ranking. They still got the 3 seed overall. So Penn State, same thing. They didn't drop people off the face of the earth because of a conference championship loss.
What would you tweak going into next season?
Dan, it makes my head hurt when I see the rankings and then the seedings being different. Like, I just need it to all be one. I don't need all of this numbers stuff. I'm not that bright. I don't want to think that hard. I think the best team should be they should be seeded 1 through 12 if we're going to stay at 12, and seed them 1 through 12 and then give them the best matchup and the best path going forward. But the seedings with the rankings, it's just frustrating. I think everybody would get away with or do away with the preseason stuff probably more and more, because we have preconceived notions going into the season that don't turn out to be true with the ranked wins sometimes that were very fraudulent. But I also would change one other thing, Dan. Like, I need more interconference matchups. So I need to get rid of some of these cupcakes. And I need the ACC to play. Every team in the ACC needs to play one team in the SEC. Every team in the ACC needs to play one team in the Big Ten. Every team in the ACC needs to play one team in the Big 12. So now when we're doing this crossover game and this strength of schedule game and who would beat who game, we have more information and more data points that go into it that can help us make more informed decisions.
I've been suggesting since this format started is if you win your conference, you're in. I'm fine with that. It's like the NCAA tournament with March Madness. If you win the SEC, that doesn't mean you're number 1 seed. You just get in the tournament, you're going to have a pretty high seed. So Boise State winning its conference, or Arizona State winning their conferences, you're in. That doesn't mean you get a first-round bye. Let's be fair to everybody. Have Vegas give you their odds, and then once you're in, and then we seed you. We have 1 through 12, and then you have your matchup. So whoever is 1, if you have Oregon at 1 and you have Clemson at 12, that's your first-round matchup. Or they get a bye for the first 4, first 4 ranked teams. I'm okay with all of that. I don't think it's that difficult to figure this out moving forward.
We're going to make everything difficult. That's what we're going to do. I mean, we even made the head-to-head difficult. Like, when you're starting to diagnose, Bama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and you're starting to do that game between those 3, we were talking, and like everybody's banging the drum for South Carolina. They had a great season, Dan, an awesome season, but you lost to both teams. Like, that's part of the criteria. The criteria very much stipulates it's head-to-head. And then common opponents, which when you went with Bama and Ole Miss, they had a lot of common opponents, and Ole Miss, quite honestly, fared better against them. But, yeah, I think the committee – maybe a little more transparency there. I think you would take that too, Dan, wouldn't you?
I would, but college football loves a mess, though, David.
Yeah.
If this was clean and there's no debate, like they want this to be debated. They're okay with being criticized. We're not allowed to see what goes on in those meetings. So,
but at least we're debating. At least we're debating 12, the 12th, the 13th, 14th team versus 4, 5, and 6,
yes.
and an FSU who was undefeated getting left out. So that makes you feel a heck of a lot better. You're leaving out a team that's going to bang their chest. They got 3 losses. Like that's not. We're not feeling sorry for anybody with 3 losses.
He's David Pollack, the former All-American linebacker at Georgia. Used to be with ESPN's College Game Day. You can see David Pollack college football on YouTube. How many teams can win the national title?
Man, that's a great question. I think I would go with, confidently, I would go with 4. I think there's 4 teams that could win it. Actually, I'd go with 5 because and I know people are going to say this to me, like Notre Dame's never done anything and they're going to push back. But I like the dominance that I've seen from Notre Dame. I like the attitude. I think they know exactly who they are, which I think there's a lot of teams in here that we don't really know who they are. So the one side, I'll go Georgia and Notre Dame. On the other side, again, this is why the bracket's harder, I'll go Oregon. I think Tennessee could win it. I think Ohio State could win it. And I'm not there on Texas just because of their offense, but I think with their defense being so elite, I think it'll keep it in it. But their offense has been so strange to have a Sark team that's not great on offense. But I guess that's 6, 4 up top, 2 down low.
Okay, should it be held against Georgia that Carson Beck got injured? And now granted, his backup is a 5-star recruit, but we did this to Florida State. I've already heard from Florida State fans.
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to penalize Georgia? Now it's 12 teams. If it's 4, I don't know if Georgia's in. Like, I don't know how these things would have played out like that. But did the committee penalize Georgia in any way that they may not have their best quarterback going forward?
I think the difference between FSU and Georgia to me is Georgia clearly looked better with their backup quarterback. FSU looked like a train wreck on offense. Yeah. So that's where I would say FSU's defense still looked elite. They still won the ACC. They were still great. Georgia's defense still looked elite, but like I would argue by watching that game, the second half, Georgia's offense went like this as opposed to off a cliff with FSU. So I think that probably goes into it as well.
And I know you played defense, and watching these games this weekend, like the NFL was violent. It's not as violent as college football. It's just not. I mean, it feels like they let you play a little bit more. You get away. I know they have targeting, but damn, that Texas game, I mean, holy smokes, David.
That hit near the goal line was outstanding, too. I mean, like, listen, I don't – we can debate whether that's targeting, Dan. Like, it's overtime, and you are trying to score inside of my 5. I'm taking your lid off. I'm doing whatever is necessary to keep you out of my end zone. But I think the biggest difference when I was in it, man, like the passion and adrenaline and the hatred is a little bit stronger at the college level. When I was in the NFL, I remember being around pals and they're kind of like holding you up like, hey, don't get tangled up. Don't get in the pile. I'm like, what? What? So I think it is definitely a different game. And listen, everybody complained, Dan, when we talked about NIL and we talked about transfer portal, and everybody got upset. And I get it. But because of that, we have more parity in the game of college football than we've ever had. Nobody's going anymore to sit behind at big-time schools and be developed. They're going to get a paycheck. And so the talent is spread out more. The dominance of the teams aren't as big as they used to be. And so I think it's even more intense every week and more hatred, and some of the rivalries obviously being there every single year.
What if Ohio State loses to Tennessee?
Oh, boy. It's interesting to hear Kirk on the broadcast the other day talk about, the Ohio State, and if they start slow, the fans jumping on top of them and booing, and there's just it's just crazy with the Ryan Day because 47-1 in the Big Ten, 47-1, but 1-4 versus Michigan, and that has just been absolutely his kryptonite, and he's had no answer for it, and even Michigan, and Dan, it's not Harbaugh because he's gone. Like, it's not all those players that got drafted because he's gone. It's not Connor Stallions because he's gone. Like, it's running out of things on the other side that continue to beat you. So if I'm an Ohio State fan, I get the frustration. I know he's been great, but yeah, first round loss to Tennessee, which could happen because Tennessee's a really, really good football team. I don't know what the heck it looks like in Columbus.
How rough was the year for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama?
You know, it's interesting because if we're going to be fair, and I always want to be fair, there's so many players that left. Like, this is not the same team Nick Saban had from a talent standpoint. Like, guys took off left and right once they found out that Nick Saban was leaving and was retiring. So his talent isn't as great as it was. But I think the inconsistencies and the up and down, and I think what you thought with Kalen DeBoer, you got was an offensive genius who would score a bunch of points. So to have them score, the second last game of the season against Oklahoma to score 3 points and get beat by 21, like, that's not acceptable if you're a Bama fan. Not going to the playoff is one thing, but losing to Vandy, losing to Oklahoma, penalties palooza, offense not taking off like you should. So I think there's going to be frustration. I think this helps recruiting from other standpoint because the negative recruiting is going to pile on like crazy. So I definitely don't think he came in. I'm not going to give him an A. I don't think he failed either, but somewhere in there was a C because it was kind of a below average season for Alabama.
He gets one of these. That's it.
He gets one of these what?
Seasons.
Yeah, maybe 2 at the very most 2. But yeah, you're right because this is not Alabama. Like, this is not their standard and who they are. So yeah, it's not going to be a long leash for an Alabama coach that has a lot of talent, a lot of resources in the history of that program.
Good to talk to you as always, David. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you, big dog.
Always love David Pollack, college football. You can see his show on YouTube and a new children's book, The Won't Quit Kid, now available online at bravebooks.com.